Good afternoon, and welcome to our continuing series, Interviews with Disciples and Devotees. Again, we're honored to have Kittu Reddy with us. Namaste, Kittu. And we are continuing with the ideal of human unity. We will conclude chapter 7 and then begin chapter 8.
So, chapter 7 is titled as The Creation of the Heterogeneous Nation. That means a nation is made up of many elements, and that's why it's called heterogeneous. Even a small nation like England is made up of Angles, Saxons, Normans, Druids, and it is a combination of all different tendencies. And yet it has to be harmonized and brought into the form of a nation. So here he is speaking of the creation of the heterogeneous nation. And he is taking the example here of Great Britain. Almost great success, partial failure. But one of the methods that nature uses in order to create a sentiment, a feeling, a psychological sense is what he calls a fiction. In other words, you create an image in the minds of the people that this is our mother country. And if you can create that and succeed in creating that image, at the beginning it might be a fiction, but once that fiction becomes a reality, then automatically there is. And yesterday I received a letter written by somebody who is from Pakistan, who writes to someone in India, please stop reminding us all the time that we are of the same stock. You see, because if they feel that they belong, they were Indians and now they have separated, and the pressure for unity will increase. So they have to try to create a fiction that you belong to God knows what, Saudi Arabia or whatever it is. Now, that's a fiction which I don't think will succeed, because it is not based on any reality.
Mother calls it a falsehood.
No, that is extreme. But I am not bringing the mother into the picture. Aurobindo used the word falsehood, fraud and force. 3 F's. That's very strong, right? So, now the British nation, as I said, was made up of heterogeneous elements, composite elements, Angles, Saxons, Normans, Druids, and many others. They managed to bring everyone together. The Welsh, the Scotch, the English themselves, right? And their one source of failure, or one area of failure, was Ireland. Why did they fail with Ireland? Because Ireland had a very ancient culture. It had got, as a result of that culture, a sense of tremendous identity and pride. Now, if England had to bring Ireland into the fold of Great Britain, you have to treat them with respect, respect that individuality, and yet make them feel that they are British. But when they found that there is resistance, then they use the exactly opposite method. They tried to punish them. They created an artificial famine. There was plenty of food, but Ireland did not get food. Now the result is that if you are weak culturally and you succumb, but if you are strong, you revolt. So they revolted. And even today, Southern Ireland is not part of Great Britain. It is a separate country in the United Nations. They have reasonably close contacts, but see now, this is a very important political movement. When someone's individuality is developed, the more you try to crush, the more there will be violent reaction. You have to somehow manage to bring them together. And for that you might have to use what he calls this concept of fiction, saying that Ireland is okay, it has got its identity, but its real identity is the mother country called Great Britain. So this is the whole game that had to be played, which Britain did very well with Wales and Scotland and part of Ireland, but the other part of Ireland refused. And even today, Great Britain is Protestant by religion. Southern Ireland is Catholic by religion. Clearly letting them know that we are not part of you. So, you understand the problem now, no?
Also, one thing I would like to say, that the Irish, like even in East Africa,
What?
Irish
I'll
are
have to-
treated inferior by British.
Hansaben says that even in Africa, the Irish were treated as inferior by the British.
Yes. Because they were trying to use pressure and force and humiliation because the Irish refused to give up their identity. See? But now it is impossible because the world conditions have changed radically. So Great Britain has become now a second-rate nation. Northern Ireland is quite close to Great Britain, but Southern Ireland is distinctly independent with its own characteristic. And this is, by the way, Aurobindo had a very deep inner contact with Ireland. He respected it very much. Just as I don't think he ever went to Ireland, but just as he respected France very much, the French culture, he never stepped on the French soil. Similarly, he found that the Irish, and both of them have got an element which is common, which is called Druidic. The Druidic culture, which is refined and of a higher, was the source of the cultural movements in France and Ireland.
In the future poetry,
In the future,
Sri Aurobindo praises the Irish poets.
yes.
Yes.
Yeats,
Yeats, A.E.
Russell,
A.E.
yes.
Russell.
and Bernard Shaw. He
Yes.
was not a poet, but
No, but
he was very witty and very humorous. So they had a very fine mind, which they expressed in their own way. So now, the important thing that we are seeing is that every community, especially today in the modern world, a reasonably large sized community is heterogeneous. The ashram is absolutely heterogeneous. Made up of Frenchmen, made up of Englishmen, made up of Bengalis, made up of Tamilians, made up of the whole of India, made up of Americans, etc., etc. And we are united by only one thing. If there is anything else that unites, it will not last. And that thing that unites us is Mother and Sri Aurobindo. As long as that is preserved strongly, we are safe. Once that starts cracking, then the whole problem will, it will have dangers and repercussions. So now next he is taking up the same problem but on a bigger scale. The problem of a federated heterogeneous empire. Now an empire is by its very nature heterogeneous, because an empire has been built by conquest. Military conquest first, then economic conquest and exploitation, then political conquest, and finally cultural conquest. And if they succeed in that cultural conquest, that nation is gone. So there was an attempt in India to make us feel proud that our mother country was Great Britain. But except for short periods and a very small section, I won't call it fringe, it's a little more than a fringe, who were very proud that Britain was their mother and they were willing to give up their Indian culture. Indian culture is too deeply rooted. It has existed for 5,000 years, and Indian culture is essentially based on the Hindu culture. We need not hesitate in saying that, because no doubt there is ample place for Islam, for Christianity, for Sikhism, for Jainism, for every other religion, but it is essentially Hindu. And as Sri Aurobindo said to someone when somebody asked him, is there any danger of Hinduism being extinguished? Because there was terrific pressure by the British. And Sri Aurobindo made it categorical that Hinduism has survived for more than 5,000 years and will continue to survive at least another 5,000 years. Because there is something so profound in it, so deep, so wide, that you cannot eliminate it. And since I have mentioned this, in the foundations of Indian culture, he says Hinduism is so wide that it can absorb Christianity, it can absorb Islam as sub-parts of the Hindu religion. But for that, there has to be a wideness, an openness,
Yes.
and it is there to a certain extent, but much more needs to be done. Anyway, that is the second thing. So now we are coming to the problem of a federated heterogeneous empire.
Chapter 8.
This is chapter 8. Empire is evidently heterogeneous. Military conquest, military colonization, then next is political conquest, economic conquest and exploitation, and an attempt to culturally swallow you up. And as I said in one of my previous talks, this chapter is outdated. When Sri Aurobindo wrote, there was still some little possibility. But today, every country in the world, or almost every country, has got an identity and a culture and an individuality which it is becoming very difficult to suppress. Right? So, Here he is taking the example of Britain and how it handled this heterogeneous empire. Now look at the British Empire, say 1860, 1870. It was Great Britain, it was South Africa, it was the West Indian Islands, it was also for some time the United States of America. But then the United States revolted against what they call the mother country, and then they became independent, 13 states, and then they annexed the whole of the continent, and you have the United States of America. So England had, as I said, South Africa, the West Indies Islands, Kings, Jamaica, etc., the United States of Europe, Australia, and Canada. Now look, these 5 which I have selected, all of them were English speaking. English is the mother tongue of Australia. English is the mother tongue of the United States of America. English is the mother tongue of Australia. And even in Kingston, Jamaica and all these West Indies players, their main language is English. They are trying to assert their individuality. The one problem was India. Huge country, 5,000 years of culture, very proud of their language, Sanskrit. So they tried their very best to get the Indians to feel that their mother tongue was, their origin was, and that is why 2 theories were built up. One is that Aryan invasion. Aryans are Indo-Europeans who came from somewhere in Europe and Central Asia to civilize these people. Then they will say that is the origin of civilization. That Aurobindo in his book on the secret of the Veda, he has smashed it. He has said that there is a whole chapter at the end called The Origins of Aryan Speech. And he shows very clearly that its origin is not outside India. It is in here. And secondly, they created this theory of Dravidians and Aryans. Again, Aurobindo says categorically that this difference of race is completely false. And as he said, that when he came here to Pondicherry in 1910, by 1911, 1912, he found that the local Tamilians, Subramaniam Bharati and all of them, who were quite close to him, friendly, he said, I could look at them and think that they were Bengali. So this distinct race of Dravidian and Aryan is a creation of Western imagination, with the deliberate aim of dividing the country into 2, distinct races. What you can say is that there is a slight difference between the South Indian culture and the North Indian culture. And that is historical difference. Because first of all, to come from North India to South India in those days was not very easy. Secondly, there were the Vindhya mountains, which proved to be a certain kind of obstacle. And thirdly, there is a little much later, the Muslims' influence on India is very much less compared to that which is in North India. So you will see in South India, except in Telangana, with Hyderabad as its capital, there is a lot of Urdu. Even in the Telugu that they speak, there is Urdu, which is sponsored by the Muslims. But in Tamil there is hardly any Urdu. In Malayalam there is hardly any Urdu. In Kannada there is hardly any Urdu. There is a little bit. So the South Indians have managed to keep their identity to a very great extent. So here he is now speaking about the problem of the federated heterogeneous empire. They had no very major problem dealing with Canada, with Australia, and with South Africa, because the bond was stronger, sometimes of race, sometimes of language. Because the Australians, the original Australians, they were called in a very negative way as aborigines. And then afterwards, the British population went in a very big way and took over. And so they feel that it is really an extension of Great Britain. Today the Australians, I have talked to some, right? There are one or two here, and they are very proud. They refuse to accept, and they are very unhappy that this aboriginal culture was almost suppressed and destroyed. Because you call it aboriginal, but usually these aboriginal cultures and this Red Indian culture in the United States, they were so close to nature. There was something beautiful in them, and that was unfortunately suppressed, right? United States, England did not do the suppression of Red Indians as much as the Americans themselves did it. And I have got articles now, not too many, but who regret enormously that there are such beautiful things in the Red Indian culture which we should have preserved. But then now they have put them in, what is it called? Special... There is a word, no?
Yeah.
Reservations.
Reservations, basically, yes.
Something like that, right?
Reservations, yeah.
So, it is a pity because what we call aboriginal and very old, right, is not always... they might not have TV and cell phone and cameras, right? But there's something else which is very deep, which is very profound. And that should be kept. And now the world is beginning to realize the importance of tribals. In India they are realizing that tribals are very important. They have something to give. You civilize them a little bit, you give them, you don't keep them backward, but at the same time, let them live their own true life. And that will contribute to the national and world culture at some time or the other.
I have met with the Todas.
With the
Todas.
Todas.
Todas. Very fine people.
Where did you meet them?
North of Bangalore, in, I'm trying to think of it, garden area, big garden city. Ooty.
Ooty, okay.
Yeah.
Right. You see, they are very simple people.
Yes.
And they are very close to nature.
Yes.
And that is something which modern world has lost to a great extent.
Yeah.
Now there is an understanding and there is a reaction. So gradually we are trying to bring. So anyway, what he is trying to show here is that this federated heterogeneous empire, the first step, as I said, is military conquest, military colonization, political conquest, and then economic. Unfortunately, in the modern times, it has become economic exploitation. And when it becomes exploitation, it becomes very difficult to unite. But if it was economic benefits that were passed on to the country that was conquered, that was weaker, right? Then naturally there would have been, and do not underestimate the importance of economics. Germany was made up of 256 states, all of them separate, small states, with one very big state called Prussia. Now, England was well formed, France was well formed, Spain was formed, Portugal was formed, but Germany was not united. And they realized that unless they are united, they cannot stand up to these well formed countries. So Germany was really born in 1865 or so, 1860s. And the man who formed it was Bismarck. Aurobindo speaks highly of Bismarck. Although his methods were brutal, he was very cruel, but that cruelty was with an aim of uniting Germany. So since the aim was large, whatever you might say about Bismarck, Aurobindo has a kind word for him. Because sometimes, unfortunately, in order to bring about unity, one has to be very severe with those who are. So Prussia conquered all the remaining 256 states, but not by military force. There is a word which he has used here. It is called Zollverein. Zolleverein. Zollverein. Which means economic unity. See, now economics, whether you like it or not, is the basis of life. If your basic needs and basic economic necessities are not met, well, there is bound to be trouble. So, Zollverein was a way by bringing about economic unity. So Prussia united Germany through the method of what is called Zollverein, and not by military force. Italy also became a nation only in 1860s. Before that it was Rome and all the city-states. There the method was not Zollverein. There it was diplomacy and force. So there again Aurobindo speaks of three persons, one very short-lived and two important persons. One was Cavour, every kind of diplomacy, every kind of trickery by which he could bring everyone together. And there was Mazzini, about whom Aurobindo speaks as an idealist of the highest order, but impractical. So now an idealist who cannot implement because they are too high becomes ineffective, while a combination is needed. And very fortunately for Italy, these two people were there side by side. They hated each other, but they did work together. And Aurobindo got a whole small booklet. I think it is called the French Revolution. He speaks a lot of the French Revolution. Then he speaks of Cavour and Mazzini. And then there was a man called Garibaldi, red shirts. He used to live in South America. And he had an army of his own, all red color. So they are called red shirts. When he found that there is trouble in Italy, he came straight with his army, conquered the people, brought about some unity, and went back. No seizure of power, no ambition, nothing. He just made Italy one. So it was a very interesting combination of three people. Garibaldi, the idealist with strength, Mazzini, and with no ambition whatsoever. Mazzini, an idealist who was impractical, and Cavour was a diplomat who used all kinds of even crooked methods to get Italy united. Now this is the whole problem which the ethical people have to decide whether when your aim is high, you are permitted to use methods which are not acceptable ethically. Right? The history of mankind is full of that. All kinds of methods to get something that is a little higher than what is there at present. So I will not get into that discussion. That's a matter of opinion, and that's a matter of continual discussion. Right? So what Aurobindo says is that Great Britain was more or less successful with the English-speaking colonies of the empire. But with India it was very difficult. They tried their best. And even today, there are very many Indians to whom I talked last night who are very proud that they speak, and they speak beautiful English. They've lived in London for a long time. Her English is exquisite. She's a very nice person. But I told her one thing which shook her. And she said, you see, it was a conversation with three of us, myself, Kirit and Tanmay. And suddenly she raised up the question of language. And she said, look at France. Every Frenchman speaks French. Good French, bad French, literature doesn't matter, but he speaks French. We must have a language in India which every Indian will speak. Because here in Tamil Nadu we speak Tamil, in Andhra Pradesh we speak Telugu, in somewhere else we speak Malayalam, somewhere else you speak Bengali, somewhere else you speak Hindi. But you must have a common language. And she said, I know that people find it difficult, but it has to be Sanskrit.
This is Sampadananda's,
Huh?
Sampadananda's view exactly.
What?
Dr. Sampadananda.
He is absolutely on that line. And that interview was with three of us. And I raised the question. And some mother said, no, Sanskrit must be the language. And she said, I would like a day very soon to come when every member of the ashram can talk some Sanskrit. He need not talk well, but he should be able to express himself in some kind of manner. Right? Well, there was a lot of enthusiasm in 67, 68, 69. Gradually it has faded. But there are people who are keeping it alive. Sampal is one, Narendra is one, and a few others.
Yes.
And sooner or later, I don't know whether sooner or later, Sanskrit will become the national language of India. And the present government believes in that, but to make it effective is going to be difficult. It is a combination of political and linguistic pride and problems.
And the educational system.
And the educational system is to radically change.
Yes.
Today in the morning in one of my classes, one of the girls said, Kittu, unless the educational system is changed in India, we'll remain always backward. It has to be based on Indian culture. It has to be open to England and to France, because these two languages are very important. But not only English, English and French, but mainly mother tongue and Sanskrit. So I think Mother made this rule in Aurobindo that everybody there must learn Tamil, their mother tongue, English and Sanskrit. Because Aurobindo is many world, some 80 nations or 90 nations, no? So be proud of your language. You are living here with the local people, learn Tamil.
Yes.
Learn Sanskrit because that is the roots of Indian culture. and learn English because that is an international language. They communicate with the rest of the world. So, as Aurobindo says categorically, that this heterogeneous empire was successful where race and language were similar. But where culture, race, and language were radically different, it was a failure. And that's why that's why India has preserved, despite a section of the people who are very proud of being English, right? And that is it. So,
When you began this chapter, you said it's outdated.
it is outdated because there is no question of empire anymore. Correct?
Correct. Yes.
Neither homogeneous empire nor heterogeneous
Yes,
empire.
yes.
So the question of binding people will be now in a different way, not politically or militarily. You have to bind people by a deeper culture,
Yes.
by sometimes by language. And today, because of the tremendous globalization, many people all over the world would like to learn so many languages. And do you notice that here in this room there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 foreigners, not Indians. Am I right? Only 3 Indians. Me, Anmol, and you. Correct or not? You are right, she. 4, right? That's all. No, but now everybody is beginning to realize the tremendous importance of all the different languages. And remember one sentence of Aurobindo: language is the index of the soul of a people.
Beautiful.
Language is the index of the soul of a people. And I can assure you that there are certain words in Sanskrit and Indian language which no other tongue can explain. And Aurobindo himself says that. He calls that dharma. Now you try to give an English word, a French word, mother side herself. I just can't explain dharma except by dharma. There is no word which gives you that feel, of dharma. So similarly, there are words probably in French which you will not be able to get into any other language. There are certainly words in English which you will not be able to translate in any other form, right?
Yes.
Right. So the language is the index of the soul. And if you learn the language well, you can commune with the people. See, we are very lucky in ashram. Most of the students know English, know French, they know something of Sanskrit, they know their mother tongue. Now there are people who are learning Spanish, who are learning Portuguese,
Italian.
Russian.
Russian.
Right? And this makes the field very wide.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And look at all our students, where are they going? A very large number are going to France, right? Some are going to England, right? Many are staying back in India, of course, but this tremendous, and they are absolutely at ease in France. I got a letter from Arya Yudsu, Alok Pandey's son.
Mm-hmm.
He's in England, he's in France, he's in America, he moves about. He speaks good Indian language. He's passionately fond of cricket. That's why he spends a lot of time in England. But he is completely at ease with, there is no problem at all. So it is very desirable, and the reason is one simple sentence. Language is the index of the soul of a people. It is there in the Ideal of Human Unity in a much later chapter.
Good place to end it.
So we'll stop here today.
Thank you.
If anybody has any question, you can ask. Amra?
No questions.
Anmol, you are the one man who asks. Funny?
No, not yet. When would you say that the imitation or following of many things American is a kind of empire in a way?
What?
A psychological empire.
Couldn't read it.
There's
Would
so
you
much
say that-
fondness in India of American things.
The fondness in India for American things.
I couldn't get it.
She says the fondness in India for American things, is that not a kind of empire?
No, I won't call it an empire at all. First of all, it is not true. You see, if somebody has got something better than I have got, if you have a better camera than I have got, today the number of Chinese goods that are being sold in India is formidable, right? We have no love for China at all, but we have love for goods. And if you give me a camera that is much better, or a cell phone that is much better, or a TV that is much better, or a technological instrument that is much better, it is quite natural. But that doesn't mean that the Indians are leaning towards America, not at all.
Good.
This is very practical, common sense.
No, but empire means a domination by one culture of another, is it not?
That is in the very largest sense. And that is happening even among you, among us. There are people who dominate you or me or somebody else because they are far more intelligent or far more capable. Right? And many human beings don't think. They are completely dominated by other personalities. You won't call that empire. That's an influence. And a very powerful influence. Empire is always a dominance which has a political element in it. And then the other consequences like economic and lastly cultural. Today, whether you like it or not, America is the dominant nation of the world. Very powerful, very strong, but then culturally, because they have to use the English language and only the English language, right? They are subordinate in certain senses. Aurobindo writes somewhere in his book, if America had been able to keep away from England for 100 years, they would have developed a language of their own. Their cultural contribution to the world would have been very, very bigger. Today, the Americans have hardly anything to contribute from the cultural point of view. Economic, military, technological, absolutely. England has so much to contribute culturally. France has so much to contribute culturally. Ancient Greece has so much to contribute. My nephew went to Greece a few days back and he said, I was in raptures seeing the Acropolis and all those beautiful work of Phidias. And suddenly you feel that, oh my God, to what a level they have reached.
At the Christmas party yesterday,
What?
at the Christmas party on
Day for yesterday.
day before, at the theater, they had, I think for the first time, they had one game that was a quiz. So these two older students, they were asking the little kids different questions.
What is the question? There was a
So-
quiz.
Yeah, they asked who was the president of India, both past and present. They didn't know. But they knew Donald Trump was president of America.
Did you what?
Um,
They also didn't know anything about Ramayana and Mahabharata, so the older student, he really scolded them. They didn't know the birth year of Rabindranath Tagore.
That is
Bengalis.
that is one of the
They were
most
asking.
serious shortcomings of our school.
yeah, yeah.
Right? You will be shocked to know that they know everything about other countries. They don't know anything about India. Neither historically nor, and that is a very serious shortcoming. It doesn't mean we have to be narrow, but certainly it means that you must know your country. And today, because there are certain teachers who are pressing this, many students are learning by themselves. And actually, today you don't need a school for learning. All that you need to know is to go to the internet, see many, many options, right? Then go and consult a teacher. With Aurobindo, you can't do that. Internet will not. You need a lot more reading. Anmol, you have something?
No, I was just saying that there was an invasion of American culture and foreign culture in the early 90s or mid 90s when the satellite television came into India.
Yeah.
And the impact of that is still there very much.
It is bound to be
Huge
there.
invasion was there.
No, but it has not unrooted us.
Yeah.
Nor created an empire.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Luba?
Just one more thing, why does Pondicherry, for example, why do they want things like Baskin and Robbins ice cream and Kentucky Fried Chicken?
Why?
Why does Pondicherry want Baskin and Robbins and Kentucky Fried Chicken?
To eat. It's very
Those
tasty.
those are American enterprises. Now I want to know who's benefiting more from that economically, India or America?
You see, the normal human being would like to eat the best food or the one that is supposed to be the best food because they don't taste it often, and that is natural. Only when they become conscious that look, Chinese goods are flowing in by the millions, stop buying Chinese goods. The Narendra Modi government is pushing on that line. Then they will stop because they are realizing that the money that they are giving to buy a cell phone or this or that is going to a country that is your enemy. So better not do it. But until that awakening comes, and that awakening is being slowly brought about, that is through the digital method.